to today's session at Guildford Library. We are not expecting a fire alarm, so if it does go off, it is the real thing. If you could exit through the double doors there will be staff members to guide you to the muster point. We have refreshments, if anyone would like to grab themselves one, and we also have toilets through this door, and it's the first door on the right. And that's all the boring stuff, so I'll hand you over to Nikki.
Hey. So good to be here again. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Toby, and I'm super excited to have Nikki right here with me. Hi! Final moment. We're going to be kicking off today's session slightly different, because I just want this to be very conversational. Like, let everybody get talking and all bossed up and excited. And I've got a few trivial questions for the audience. And the reason for this is because the book in focus is one that is, I think a lot of non-Nigerians or non-Africans find it to be quite a tongue twister. So if a non-Nigerian here can attempt to pronounce the title of our book in focus. So what's to go first? Ooh. Do you mind? I know for Nigerians it's quite easy. It's one of those words that we, use.
I'll give it a try.
Yeah.
Let me see the title again, and I can. Wahala.
Ah, nice try. Cool. Anyone else?
Wahala?
Surprise. One last try from someone else? No.
I hear it every day. So.
Oh yeah. Of course you will. Okay, so I'm going to use my best Nigerian accent right now. It's called Wahala. Okay, so that's more Yoruba-ish, right?
Yeah.
But a more colloquial or generally acceptable way of pronouncing it is Wahala. Wahala. And before we go on, I would later ask Nikki some questions around, okay, so what really inspired the title and all. But now I'll go on to my second trivial question. Has anyone here read the book? To start with, awesome. So, who wants to make an attempt to pronounce or tell us like 2 of the recipes shared in this book?
Oh my god. There were so many.
I know.
Okay. One of the best things about the book.
I googled the rice one.
Ah, lovely. Do you know what it's made from? I know that's like jollof rice.
Yes.
Right. So, can you mention maybe a few of the ingredients? Do you remember?
I don't actually.
It's at the back of the book.
You cook the rice and then you add various other things.
Yeah.
So,
And it's usually flavorful.
It's
Yeah.
like our paella, really.
yes.
Any other attempt at the recipe? Anyone else? I know there's moi moi,
Yeah, there's one.
and then
Chicken stew?
Yes, the chicken stew. I love the fact that one of the editions of the book comes along with some of the recipe on the back. So you should definitely attempt that and try out. And I think the last one for me would be eforiro. So eforiro is made from spinach and kale, the variants. Since I moved to the UK, I've always had cross to make that just to remind me of home. My third trivial is to test, of course, yet another knowledge of the book, which is if anyone could mention 2 of the main characters in this book.
Okay.
Because you're room. Anyone else?
Silly and Boo?
Oh, lovely. Any other characters you want to mention?
We don't want to talk about Isabel.
Yeah, I was going to say
Isabel. And then there's Kayode too. Okay. I think that should be all. And I'm just curious to get 1 or 2 feedback as regards how did you find out about the book and what actually attracted you and intrigued you the most about it? Anyone?
I saw it. I was looking for something interesting to come and visit in Guildford, and so I found this session.
Bless you.
And then I saw that Wahala was Wahala.
Ah.
one of the books, and so bought it for that. We both bought it.
Bless you.
But I've been reading it up until lunchtime today, going, I must read it.
I get an email from the library,
Oh.
and I saw this, and I thought it was interesting, and I asked my friend to come
Oh.
with me, and she bought the books, but we haven't finished it. I'm afraid.
Right.
It was actually the first book I read in 2022.
Oh.
Through some friends, we had this reading club, and 2 friends had said that, there's this book, and apparently it's really good. We have to read it.
Oh.
So yeah, we've read it, and
Amazing.
we had a lot to talk about.
Wow. Anyone else read the book?
I've read it, yeah.
Yeah. And why did you read it, or how did you find out about the book?
Because of Nikki.
Oh!
We're long lost friends, really. We're
Oh,
long lost friends.
beautiful.
So yeah, I saw it on Facebook and I thought I've got to buy it. And in fact, I put you had to pre-order. I've got the hardback one. So I had to pre-order it quite a while.
Yeah. And of course you enjoyed it.
Of course, no, I did. I did, and I recommended it to a friend, and she's in this big book club, and they all bought it.
Oh,
Yeah.
Amazing.
So it's really good.
How many people find the UK cover super attractive?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it's the best cover.
Yeah,
Good.
so pretty, girly, and fancy too. Okay, thank you so much for engaging. We very quickly want to go over Nikki's bio. So I couldn't find so many stuff about Nikki online on Google. Hopefully she lets us into more details about herself. But I'm going to attempt a short bio very quickly. And I've got here that Nikki was born in Bristol and raised in Lagos, Nigeria. She lived in Nigeria till she was about 20. And while in Nigeria, she started a medical degree before she dropped out of medical school and moved to London. I hope I got that right. Newly relocated, Nikki May grappled with culture shocks, imposter syndrome, which she actually did a good job at hiding, and modified her name from Morenike to Nikki. So if anyone has ever wondered where Nikki came from, she is Yoruba. Yoruba is from the southwestern part of Nigeria, and the full version of her name is Morenike. I got that right. And after leaving medical school and her home country in Nigeria, she began a career in advertising.
Where I met Peter.
Peter, Mr. Blazer.
No, this way, Peter, no. Yeah.
Lovely. So she enjoyed such level of success in her advertising career before she turned into writing. Over a long and loud lunch with friends, the idea for Wahala, a debut novel, was born. It was published in January 2022 and is soon to be turned into a major BBC TV drama. Excellent. I'm super excited about that. In an interview, she expressed her joy at the turn of events, confirming that she will be the executive producer. And when her name comes up on the credits, she will pause to savor the reality. I'm manifesting that for you now. Nikki has confessed how proud of Wahala she is because in it, she has put successful Anglo-Nigerian women at the front and center. She's certain that she succeeded in doing that just because she's been able to amplify our own lived experiences through the major characters in her book. So, ladies and gentlemen, can we just jam our hands together and clap for Nikki May? Okay, you can almost predict on my first question. Yes, right? I'm going to talk about how for everyone that I've attempted to introduce this book to, especially non-Nigerians, one of the biggest way that I sell it to them is that, oh, by the way, the book is going to be a BBC drama series real soon. How exactly are you feeling about that, and how did the whole deal for the BBC drama series come about?
it's surreal. I still don't believe it. I still pinch myself to believe it's happening, but apparently it really is. It's been greenlit. It's basically been ordered by the BBC, so it will be a 6-part. And it's being made by the producers Liz Kilgareth, and she did Bodyguard, she did Luther, she did The Cry, so she's proper calibre. I mean, she really knows what she's talking about. And the way it came out was my UK agent, it was just after we'd sold the book to the publishers in the UK and in the States, and they said, let's talk about book to film. And I was still reeling from the fact that I was going to be published, because you just write into a void. You don't actually know or think it will. You want it to, of course. And in my wildest dreams, I was thinking Big Little Lies, but brown. And I was kind of imagine it, but this is just pipe dreams. And then she said they're going to co-agent with an agent in LA to talk about the book to film. I was like, really? And this is in COVID, it's all in lockdown. So I'd go for a dog walk, take off my wellies, slap a bit of slack on, and Zoom with this very LA agent. I mean, she was, you know, she had a little dog on her lap, she was as thin as a stick, and she had this very Californian accent, and she'd be like, so we're going to talk to this person, we're going to talk to that person. And anyway, it happened. And I was just thrilled it was the BBC. First, my dad's heard of them. So he's never heard of Netflix, like what? So, and also, it's like, you know, your home channel. And I also didn't want to move the location. I didn't want it to suddenly become a book set in New York or anything. And it's going to happen. TV can be very slow, but it's been greenlit, the script is being written. I have no say in anything, so they can do whatever they like. And that's kind of fine, because writing a book is so different to writing a screenplay. In my book, you can see what's in people's heads, but you can't have sort of think bubbles coming out on TV, so they will change it. I want Stormzy to be Kayode. And I want to be involved in the casting. I want a reverse Me Too casting couch situation. My husband's not listening. But so I don't know, watch this space. Apparently they'll start shooting end of this year, and it should be on the screen next year.
Oh, beautiful. Amazing. Thank you for that. My next question, of course, is an obvious one. Okay, so my next question is obviously about Wahala, like what actually inspired that title and your choice of it. If your book wasn't named or titled Wahala, what would it probably have been?
So it wasn't called Wahala. The first draft, I think it was called Big Little Secrets. I mean, I did want to write a brand Big Little Lies. So it was called something like that. And I kind of knew what the story was, and I knew what I wanted to happen, and I knew who my characters were, and I knew how it would end. But in the process of writing it, and it took 3 months, which is quite quick to do the first draft, I liked my girls so much that I didn't let anything bad happen to them. So they went out for more lunches, they bought more clothes, they gossiped more, they went on more play dates, and nothing bad happened. And I printed it out, loads of paper, wasted, and I read it, and my husband read it, and he said, this isn't what we said, this is what is this? This is nothing happens. And I realised what my book needed was Wahala. And it's kind of, I love the word. Pidgin English is quite a nice language, because words mean slightly more than just trouble. So it means trouble, but it can mean trouble in all sorts of ways. Like can you do this for me? No Wahala, or come and see my Wahala. It's kind of one of those words that is just, and in Nigeria there's a lot of Wahala. I mean, going to the bank takes 5 hours to get your own money. Buying petrol, there's just every day there's trouble. So it was kind of just about giving each girl a lot of trouble and the right trouble. And I never thought it would actually be called Wahala. Even my agent said they'll change the name because it doesn't mean anything. And I was amazed.
Yeah.
That
I think that's one of the biggest sells of the book. Like the title in itself just intrigues you, and it's like a tongue twister for those who don't know what it means.
Yeah.
And I'm like so bold, so audacious, and I honestly just couldn't wait to get into it. Talking about Nigeria and all of its Wahala right now, it's such a very important day for us.
Election day.
Back in Nigeria, it's election day. Nigerians are hitting the poll to actually cast their vote for the next president of the country. And so we're keeping our fingers crossed that the outcome is a very positive one. I'm not going to
Preferably.
Okay, so yes. We all have this preferred candidate, and we're just hoping that it makes its way.
Well, it's not 100, it's a starting point.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to get a sense of what your writing process is like. When you started the book, did you have some of the plot twists in mind, or you're just one of those writers that tend to like bring in fresh ideas at the point after they've actually commenced the book?
So I'm really disciplined. I start with I lost Excel spreadsheet, so I start with a really detailed spreadsheet of this is what I'm going to do, this is how many hours I'm going to write every day. I also add other things like I won't probably drink anything for 3 months, or I'll only eat lettuce. I mean, it becomes this whole, and then I just ignore it and don't write every day, don't do the right number of words, and ignore my plot. But it is good to write every day, but real life gets in the way. And the thing about being a writer, and all the writers I know, is you're plagued by self-doubt. You're really convinced that everything you're writing is crap. And every writer I know almost feels the same. I was talking to Ayobami, who you're talking to, and she to me is legendary. I mean, she's queen level writing. And when she said after her first book she just had writer's block, she just couldn't. Wow. And so yes, it happens to me for the rest of us. So you start with all these. I start with a plot, I start with knowing what I want to do, and I start with knowing what the chapter's going to be. But your characters have a way of doing what they want and taking your story in different directions. And then you rest with plot bits where what seemed really sensible when you were thinking it, when you come to write it, just they wouldn't do it, or they wouldn't talk that way, or it just so you kind of, it's a very twisty. So I'm quite a plotter, but I'm also a pantser. I kind of merge between both, and it's all in the editing. There's a lot of editing.
Was there any part of the editing process that you didn't quite like?
I don't like any of it.
Okay, so I know editors have just been quite a lot to deal with, and they might come back to you with like, I don't seem to understand this part. Did you push back a bit?
Oh, I did. There was one bit I remember pushing back. It's actually on the first page of the book when Ronke goes into Booker, the restaurant, and she's confronted by the smells and the sounds, because she's in London, but it's kind of this restaurant is like walking into Lagos, and Fela Kuti is blaring out of the speakers. And one of my editors said, people won't know who Fela Kuti is, so you need to put a little asterisk. I was like, what, asterisk? He's like Elvis Presley? I am not doing it, but I also think that you can read something and get it without actually knowing. I read Indian books, I read books for people, I read, and also growing up in Nigeria, I didn't know what a jam sandwich was. I was reading Enid Blyton, and I didn't know what lashings of ginger beer was, but it was fine. You still, your readers aren't stupid. You can fit, and as we grew up in Nigeria, we all of these things are quite straight, we don't get, I didn't know what snow was, but you kind of, you get it. So.
Amazing. So, talking about Ronke, I would be asking you to read an excerpt of the book.
Okay, I brought my glasses, lucky.
So, perhaps one of the most profound moments for you, or excerpt from the book, which would that be? If you've got copies, please make sure to read all of it.
Well, I think I'm going to do the beginning, because I know some people haven't read it, and it kind of gives you a flavour for the book without any spoilers. So I'll do the beginning, which is actually, and I wrote it in chronological order, so it's the first bit I wrote. And it's got lots of Nigerian words to twist myself. Pounded yam and egusi? Eba with okra? No, it had to be pounded yam, but maybe with eforuro. Ronke ran through the menu in her head as she walked up the hill to Booker. She knew it by heart, but that didn't make choosing any easier. As usual, she wanted it all. And as usual, she was running late. She stopped at the cash point anyway and withdrew £100. The girls teased her, told her it was an urban myth, but ever since Ronke had heard the story about Simi's cousin's friend getting her card cloned at Booker, she'd paid in cash. Ronke had been looking forward to their Niger lunch all week, and not just because of the food. For the first time in ages, when Simi asked, "So what's new?" the answer wouldn't be nothing. She hustled past the Sainsbury's local, the Turkish grocery and the Thai nail bar. The Nigerian flag outside Booker was looking a little tatty, frayed at the edges. The green still vibrant, but the white was a dirty beige. Ronke studied her reflection in the shiny mirrored door, yanked at her hair to fluff up some of the curls, patted to flatten some down. As good as it gets. At least once a day, someone said to her, "I wish I had curly hair," but Ronke knew better. Curls meant frizz, knots, and chaos. She pushed open the door and stepped out of suburban London and into downtown Lagos. The smell hit her first, smoky burned palm oil, fried peppers, and musty stockfish. Next came the noise. Fela Kuti blared out of the speakers, struggling to compete with the group of 3 men at a corner table, talking over each other. And because this was effectively Nigeria, their voices were louder, accents stronger, gesticulations wilder. The waiter looked up with a scowl as Ronke turned to shut the door. She knew his eyes would linger on her arse. It felt like home. She spotted Simi deep in conversation with a striking woman and felt a spike of irritation. "Just us two," Simi had said. The stranger had long toned limbs and glossy brown skin. She looked almost sculpted. Something about her profile was familiar, and for one heartbeat, Ronke was sure she knew her from somewhere. She blinked, and the feeling disappeared. She didn't know anyone who showed side boob at lunch, or had such an over-the-top blonde weave. Ronke tried to tamp down her annoyance as she wove between the tables towards them. The men stopped talking and started to watch her. She realised she was holding in her tummy. Simi stood and beamed at Ronke. It was easy to love Simi. When she looked at you, she made you believe you were the only person in the world she wanted to see. Simi had given Ronke the same look the first time they met 17 years ago at Freshers' Week in Bristol. Teeth, dimples, sunshine, joy. "Ronks, this is Isabel. You're going to love her." Simi spread her arms out warm in welcome. "I wouldn't bet on it," thought Ronke. She leaned into Simi's hug and fixed a smile on her face before turning to say hello to the interloper. Still, 3 people meant 3 starters. This Isabel better be a sharer. Simi poured her a glass of fizz as Ronke unwound her scarf. "Champagne?" Ronke asked. "We always have rosé at Booker." "It's not £40 a bottle," she didn't add. Simi nudged Ronke with her knee under the table. "Iso's allergic to cheap wine," she said, "and we're celebrating." "Here's to my divorce," said Isabel, holding her glass aloft. "And to friends, old and new."
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. I couldn't help but roll my eyes at the mention of Isabel. I am curious to know what actually inspired her character.
She's a bit of a psychopath, but I just like a bit of drama in my drama. And you have to, Isabel brings the Wahala to the table. I mean, that is her job. But the other thing is, as you know, being Nigerian, there is a small, thankfully, group of exceptionally wealthy, usually stolen wealth, corrupt, entitled, seriously entitled individuals who literally can get away with anything. And I kind of wanted to put that in my book, but in a quite dramatic way. I'd also been watching Killing Eve, and I love Villanelle, I love the wardrobe, I love the humour, so I wanted a bit of this glamour to come in. If I lived in London, which I can't afford to, I want a chauffeur, so I thought, let's give her one. So it was just quite nice to have this person, and I've tried to tie her to the characters, because the book in some ways is about the stories you inherit. But and people say it's so ridiculous and so over the top, but you haven't met these rich entitled Nigerians. I have. They can literally. I used to be able to tell where I was based on how much corruption there was in London. It's harder now. It's much harder, because now I literally could be anywhere. But I wanted to put a bit of that in.
And you sure did a good job at that. Thank you. I don't want this conversation to just be between myself and Nikki alone. And typically, conversations like this, people tend to wait till the end of the conversation before you start chipping in your questions. Still, I have trained the floor open to everyone. Do you have questions very quickly, so that way Nikki can give answers to them immediately? Anyone?
I wanted to ask something about your characters. So when you're getting the idea for the book, how fully formed in your head are they? Or is it that you have a sort of a feeling for how you want the character to be, and then they develop as you're writing?
They definitely developed. So Ronke is an exception. She kind of walked into my head fully formed. I could see her. I knew she was a dentist. I knew where she lived, which luckily happened to be my husband's mother's flat in Battersea, so I could actually see it perfectly. I knew her personality. I knew where she went shopping. She was an M&S girl, not like Isabel or Simi. She wasn't high fashion. She was very foodie, which I borrowed from me. She walked in fully formed. But Boo and Simi were much harder to pin down, and I actually went through my first draft before I got to know them. And I think as I was writing them, and the other thing with 3 characters, and I had a carousel, so the book always went Ronke, Boo, Simi, Ronke, Boo, Simi. So you had to make sure their voices were quite distinct, otherwise the reader wouldn't know whose head they were in. So after I got to the end, I had to come back and get my Excel spreadsheet out, and I actually answered 100 questions for each of them. And in a way it was to pull them apart and to keep them separate. And there were things I didn't, that would never make the book. I needed to know whether they kept their tomato ketchup in the fridge or in the cupboard. Not that, but just so that I had a really firm idea of them. And how that helps is you know how they'll react to anything, because they almost become real. And they were literally walking around in my head at this point. I was dreaming of them. I was seeing them, and I stole characters of I stole bits of myself for them. So I dropped out of medical school. And in Nigeria, there's only 4 acceptable professions. You're an accountant, you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, or you're a disgrace. So coming out of medical school, I firmly ticked, and I gave that problem to Simi, which made it quite easy for her. My mother's parents, my white grandparents wanted nothing to do with us, so I gave that problem to Ronke. And Boo's kind of adapting to fit in. I was very much like that. I changed my name to Nikki. When I first met Peter, I had straight hair, and you sort of try and assimilate. I'm not even sure there's anything wrong with it, but sometimes you can bend yourself out of shape so much that you're not sure who you are anymore. So Boo was completely bent, much more than me, because she grew up in Yorkshire with a white family, with, so she just had no idea of who she was, and the only Nigerians she knew were the ones on telly who would be arrested for something or the other, which is, I think over here you can get a really bad impression of Nigeria if all you do is watch the news. So kind of, they evolve. You start off thinking this is who they are, but at the end they've become fully fledged.
Thank you. It's really interesting.
That kind of answered my question in a roundabout way. I was going to say, I often wondered if writers sort of base their characters on maybe like people they know or things like that, isn't it? Yeah.
You do.
So you haven't got a friend like Isabel then?
Well, but my friends all want to be Ronke. Everyone wants to be Ronke. So they're always like, my sister's like, Ronke's like me, isn't she? It's like, no, Isabel's like
There was
me.
something I liked in all of the characters that relatable.
Like you do steal things. My best friend has a scatter cushion problem.
Yeah, so you,
So Ronke. I've got a friend who's such a fashionista. Give that to Cindy. So you sort of steal. I write as a magpies. I've always got a notebook. When I'm on the train, I was on a train last week going to London. I was supposed to be working, and instead I'm just literally nebbing on this couple in front of me having this argument.
Yeah.
So it's very, you steal
Can you
things.
speak up?
So you do steal from everybody, really.
I'm like that when I read though. I'm making notes all the time. Even actually, you've said about like the words and things like that and the food. I was just googling words all the time and looking up stuff and
Oh, lovely. Before I ask the next question, I'm just wondering who your biggest influences are as a writer.
This is going to sound weird, but I think it's going to be Agatha Christie. So growing up in Nigeria, and I'm much older than Toby, she's a mere child. So in my days, they weren't bookshops, well, there were bookshops, but the bookshops were all very much academic.
Yeah.
So if you wanted a book on algebra, no problem.
Yeah.
But if you wanted some fiction, it was much harder. So you read what you could get your hands on.
Yeah.
So you tended to have the classics, Enid Blyton, ate all those up before I was 8, and then discovered Agatha Christie.
Yeah.
And because she's so prolific and because she's such a legend, you find her books everywhere. And I actually, with hindsight, think I learned how to write by reading Agatha. I mean, she's just a master of plot and character and keeping the... and I still read them now. I've probably read every Poirot hundreds of times. So I think Agatha Christie's been one of my biggest influences. But I read everything. I read thrillers, I read crime, I read romance. I just love reading. So my favourite book changes every week depending on what I just read.
So what did you read this last week?
Well, I just finished a book called by Ayobami Adebayo called The Spell of Good Things, which has just come out, and I did an interview. I interviewed her for Fame, so I read that. The thing about Nigerian writers is it can be actually quite off-putting because they're also, you've got Wole Soyinka, you've got Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, I mean they're legends, and it can be almost quite crippling to think you can write a book and you're not. So it's kind of, I think there's something in our DNA about storytelling.
Did you feel that pressure to want to make it?
Totally, but I wanted to write a commercial book. For me, I wanted to write something that was a bit fun. And Nigerian writers we're not supposed to do fun. We're serious, proper, prize-winning writers. You know, we don't write frivolous stuff about Gucci shoes and, you know, so it was but the reception in Nigeria has been amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah. People love you.
I know.
It has been one of the best sellers at Image Bookstore back in Nigeria. I just mentioned, by the way. Robin, I shout out to Robin.
Very lovely book, we love it.
Okay, so my next question is around a very important theme in your book. I think that with the character of Boo, you're trying to shine the spotlight on a very important issue around mental health, right? And I wanted to find out what key message around mental health you wanted to leave your readers with, especially with Boo. Of course, it was obvious that she had such a big struggle around identity. Talk about maybe like a midlife crisis as well. She was someone who was quite discontent too about where she was in life. So just curious to know what were you hoping to achieve with that particular thing and what message you wanted to leave with the reader.
I don't know if it was mental health particularly. I think one of the things I wanted to, I didn't want to cover issues. I actually don't like issue-based books. I don't like being told how to think or being lectured. I just wanted to be entertained. But you can't, it's really difficult to write about mixed-race characters without bumping into issues. So the way I saw it was let's just bump into the issues and see how they unfold. So colorism has to come up because you've got mixed-race people, you have to talk about colorism. But I didn't actually want to say, oh, let's address this topic. I have had some bite back that it was racist to have 3 mixed-race characters. And I kind of say, well, hang on, Sally Rooney can have 20 Irish characters, Chimamanda can have 20 Nigerian characters, why are 3 of me problematic? But on the other hand, it would be stupid to pretend colorism didn't exist. So Boo is a classic example where she's prejudiced. There's no doubt Boo is prejudiced, but she's also a Mona. I mean, honestly, it's like enough Boo. Because Boo on the surface, her life's great. She's got a beautiful husband who's kind, does half the cooking, half the childcare. She's got a lovely child who's precocious but clever and smart and sweet. She's got a gorgeous kitchen, wooden floors, island. You know, it's like, what the heck has she got to whinge about? And yet she's continually whinging. But I love Boo. I actually have a lot of sympathy for Boo. So if you start with the basis that she grew up, all she knows about Nigerian men is that they're bad. Her mother was going out with a Nigerian guy who conned her, got her pregnant and then dumped her. So she then had to run to her parents in Pickering, pregnant without anyone. So Boo's brought up in a village surrounded by white people with a white mum, a white stepdad. She's just disconnected from herself. And she's not bullied, but she doesn't belong. And then she turns on the radio and everything is about Boko Haram or fraud or corruption or famine. And then her friend Ronke has this terrible taste in men, so it keeps going out with dodgy Nigerian blokes. I've dated a few of them, it's true, they exist. So everything she knows about Nigerian men is kind of bad. And so she comes out with a few racist things, but prejudice is understandable. It's not terrible. There's the other thing, I think being a woman is really hard work. There's lots of expectation on how you look, on what you do, or whether you have kids or whether you don't. And she loves her daughter, but she does think, is there more to it? And she's kind of frustrated because her best friends are living this amazing life without childcare. So I think Boo, I don't actually think she's got mental health issues. I think she's just a bit resentful and a bit sort of, is this it? And then throw a psychopath into the mix. I mean, not great.
No. And totally, I honestly feel Boo could use a therapy session. Like, she definitely needs to speak to a therapist. That's a lot of drama going on in one person's life, really. Now, more questions from the audience.
So, touching on the subject of colorism, when we had the group talk about the book, a lot of people did say, "Oh my God, the colorism was just too much. It was just a lot." But at the same time, it was good because we had a few friends.
Yeah.
They were mixed, and they saw that themselves in the book.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to say, "Oh my God, they were like colorists and all of that," but you need to look at the background. She all she knew, Boo, was that she grew up in an environment that didn't allow her to see her full self.
Exactly.
She only saw the white side because she
And
grew
she was
up.
robbed of her own
Yeah,
culture.
yeah. So I was like, no, but we have to kind of understand where she is coming from, because it's very easy. Like, especially we women, we judge each other a lot.
Right.
We don't give each other no, not even a little bit of, "Oh my God, you are terrible." No, we don't stop to think why that person behaves the way they do. So I actually think that it was really important to have the characters being the way they were for first of all, because it allowed people to have conversations that maybe they wouldn't have.
Exactly, I totally agree, and I'm so glad you saw it that way,
Yeah.
because Boo does get a lot of stick.
Oh my!
I must be a racist to have written the book, and you say,
Oh my God!
You know, just don't make it personal. If I wrote about a serial killer, would that make me so you have to be a little bit careful. But to me, what was quite interesting was that when I grew up in Lagos, I genuinely did, and everywhere I went, I'd be called Oyinbo, which means white, everywhere. Not in a nasty way, but just, most people, I was a different colour from most people. My mum got it worse. My mum is blonde and blue-eyed. She would have people coming to touch her hair because and not not nastily. And I think you have to write about, I wrote from lived experience. And personally, colorism is a terrible thing. It's, as Lupita said, it's the daughter of racism. But it exists, it's there. We can't pretend it doesn't happen. And also, some people wanted Boo to have this redemptive journey where at the end she'd suddenly turn around and, "Oh, I'm a terrible person." No, people don't.
That doesn't happen in real life.
Exactly. People don't have, people are generally who they are, and we can be a bit good and a bit bad, and it's just, I also think there's a slight problem with black writers where you're expected to write a certain way, ideally about trauma and pain and how terrible your life is. And I think it's almost, and I know stories are valid, of course they're valid, but I think we can have lots of stories.
I actually love, it's one of the things I love about the book. This is a group of friends. And to be honest, some of the Wahala was a bit too much, but at the same time, you had a group of friends that were just dealing with problems and
trying to do their best.
Trying their best. You had one that was single, you had one that was married with an amazing husband, but she couldn't see it. And I think the reason why she couldn't see it, it's because she was thinking too much. She was looking at the neighbor's garden. The grass is always greener. The grass is always greener. So I really enjoyed having the group of friends, and then they were just dealing with problems
and flawed characters are just a lot more interesting than perfect ones, Absolutely. So I will always write flawed.
It's a bit weird, but one of the things I love the most about the books and the characters was sort of like their imperfection. Yeah, and it's so reflective of life in itself. But
no one's got the perfect life, have they? So
Yeah.
everyone's got imperfections.
You want to talk to them.
Yeah. Which brings me to my next question. Who is your favorite character to write about?
I think, they were all, I love writing Isabel. Isabel is a great character, and in the paperback there's an extra bonus chapter by Isabel from her point of view, so that was fun to write. To be honest, Ronke was the easiest to write because Ronke is nice. She's not perfect, but she's very nice.
She's unbelievable, really, with the Coyote guy and how she managed to stick with him and all this.
But I love Boo. I'm going to stand up for my Boo.
Kaya Day's your favourite.
Yeah, I do love Kaya Day. Again, to me, Kaya Day is flawed. You know, Kaya gets a lot of stick again. Like, Kaya, what is... He stood her up to go and watch a football match. My husband does that every other week. What's the big deal? You know, it's kind of... I do think that I personally love Kaya Day, and that's why it's going to be Stormzy.
Anyone else got any questions? Yeah?
Could I just ask about, you know, the way you introduced the fathers and men?
Yes.
I thought that was really good, because there was something in the first part where you started saying about fathers.
Yes.
And then it was interesting to see how it sort of grew, and how, don't want to spoil it for people who haven't read it, but how good it was at the end, you know, when it all came together. But there was also something there about the attachment, you know, like attachment.
Yes.
So if you come from a family that is a little bit dysfunctional,
Yes.
or very dysfunctional, does that mean that the children of a dysfunctional father become dysfunctional? So, because Isabel was psychotic.
Totally. I think it's that sense of the father's thing, and where does the victim start, and what, you know, it's that thing of what did you inherit bad traits like. And I love that inheritance thing. While I was writing, I had a picture of me and my dad on my desk. It was at my grandfather's funeral, and in Nigeria they do this spraying thing. So at funerals, my granddad was really old when he died, and in Nigeria that's a celebration. It's like a 3-day party, and it's a picture of my dad spraying me, which people are like, why is he putting money on your head? It's like, because it was for granddad's funeral. Why are you dancing? It's part of the conversation. But this photograph, and I think subliminally it kind of infected my writing, going through the book in some way.
It was really clever.
Thank
the way
you.
it was done.
I have to be honest, some of the threads I had to go back and lay the thinking, oh, what if that happened? Then you go back and lay the path for it. But yeah.
Lovely. Does anyone else have any questions? Yeah.
I was wondering about your previous career in advertising as a medical student. Did that influence your writing in any way?
Well, dropping out of medical school saved many lives. That's for sure. Look around now who wouldn't be if I'd been allowed to continue. And advertising is actually a perfect background for writing, because you're basically creating, and you're surrounded by creative people, and you're taught to value creativity. I have to be honest, in Nigeria there's a tendency, getting better, but there's a tendency not to value creativity. It's like, oh, that little drawing is going to get you, stop drawing, go and do that, that kind of thing. So, but working in advertising, you really respect that. And then I left to start my own agency with Mr. May, and he was an art director and I was doing the copy. So you work as a team and you become very collaborative, and you also learn that ideas are not perfectly formed, that they need a lot of work to become better, and you learn to be edited, because half of the best ideas we ever had, the client ruined. And so, so you learn that, that what you deliver is never going to be. So I think you learn a lot of skills, and the difference of fiction or with writing is you don't have a brief. So in advertising there's a brief, the client wants to sell whatever it is, a widget or a concept, but with writing a book you've got a blank page. So what I did was put my own brief up on the wall, which was Write a Brown Big Little Lies, and put that up there and sort of thought to myself, think of it as a job, just think of it as a job, just get it down and think of it as work. And I think it helps if you think of it as work, because it becomes much more disciplined.
How long did it take you to work on your first manuscript?
Well, I started on a train after a long lunch and literally wrote the first scene. I'd been wanting to write a book forever, but finally I wrote the first scene. And then I got home, showed it to my husband. He said, well, just do it. You've been talking about it for long enough. And I did a 6-week Curtis Brown course, online course. And I'm still friends with the people on that course. And that was in September 2017, so a long time ago. The first draft poured out of me. I had a first draft in less than 6 months. But then that's when I printed out and thought, nothing happened. And I literally put it in a drawer and didn't look at it again for 6 months. So the whole writing process took I did it in 3 batches, 6 months draft, and then 2 edits, 3 months each, but spread out. And then I entered a few competitions, like amateur competitions, where you pay 20 quid and give them your first 3 chapters. And it was a way of seeing, is this any good? And
did you get any positive feedback?
I got shortlisted for 2, longlisted for 1, and then I won a prize. And that was the prize I won. The judge was an agent, and she said, "Can I see your book?" So that was the impetus to get on and do it.
Yeah.
Brings me to my next question around what your advice would be for aspiring writers or people looking to get published with something.
I would say do it, just write. I think the course would be helpful, but you don't need to do a course. There's enough books on there on how to write. I've read, reading is the best thing you can do to be a better writer. And if you read and try and unpick how, because there are things that I didn't think about, like point of view. Yeah. Is it third person or first person? And tense, which I've never thought about. But if you read a book that hopped around, you would find it really hard to read. So there are few sort of things you have to know, and you can either buy a book and read them or do a course, which is what I did. I think the course was £200 for a 6-week course, so it's not impossible. And the good thing about doing a course is you meet. This was virtual; it wasn't in real life; it was online. But you have a sort of connection with other people doing it, which helps because, as I said, there's self-doubt things in the way. So if at least if you have 6 people doubting themselves, you can reassure each other occasionally. And the thing is to just keep going. There's a girl on the course, Kate, who I love to death, but she is still 5 years on rewriting those first 3 chapters. And you can keep rewriting the same thing over and over again. But what you have to do is just write the book, knowing that at the end your first draft will be rubbish. It's the law. Your first draft will be crap. But until you've got a crap first draft, you don't have anything to work with. So just keep going. And when I'm writing my book too, I've got sections saying, this is absolute rubbish, come back and sort it out later. But just keep going, because by the time you get to the end, I think somebody very clever, not me, said, the first draft is you telling yourself the story, and until you know the story yourself, you can't tell it to anyone else. So when you edit it, it becomes, how's the best way to tell this story? So keep going, just write.
Beautiful. Back to the book. Do you want to read us yet another excerpt real quick, please?
Okay. See if I can find it right there. So one of my favourite bits is at the hairdresser.
Okay.
Just gotta find it. Fifi.
Oh, Fifi.
Sorry, give me a sec. Amongst yourselves. Where is she?
Is that cover the American, the US cover, is it then? That?
No, that was the hardback cover.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, that was the UK hardback, but that one's an international one, isn't it? Cool, I got it.
What page?
It's page 127. But I am blessed with covers, so that's the American hardback cover. And this is the UK paperback.
Right.
And this one, which I think is my favourite, is the American paperback.
Yeah. It's colourful.
Okay. So this is at the hairdressers. It's another Ronca chapter, and she's not my favourite on this. So, did I tell you what happened to Auntie Kay last weekend? Ronca asked. She knew she hadn't, but she wanted to start this story casually. No, what? Boo turned to face Ronca. Keep your head straight, Ma, said Fifi. I am holding Big Noodle, eh? Please don't call me Ma, said Boo for the 4th time. I'm sorry, Ma, said Fifi. It's going to be one big fro, said Ronca. Boo's hair was now a spiral of cornrows snaking round her head. Fifi was stitching on hair extensions, wefts of fizzy blonde and brown hair. I look like a mollusk, said Boo. The braids should be tighter, eh, said Fifi. This is not lasting a long time, Ma. It's tight enough. Boo peered in the mirror. I look like I've had a facelift. And I think it's too long. I don't want to be Shaka Khan. I'm cutting it after, Ma. Fifi muted the sound on the TV. Sister Ronca, you were telling us about your auntie. She pronounced it auntie. It made Ronca feel homesick. In Nigeria, everyone older than you is an auntie or an uncle. It was terrible. She'd only been home for 2 weeks when it happened, said Ronca. She ate the last piece of kelewele and wiped her hands on a napkin. She'd heard the story 3 times now. First from Uncle Joseph, then Auntie Kay herself, and finally her cousin Obi. And she'd told it 3 times, to Rafa, Kaede, and Kaede's sister Yeti. It got more exaggerated with each retelling. She spun her chair around so she was more central, then decided standing would be more dramatic. This was proper Niger gist. It had to be told the right way, in a loud voice with lavish gestures. It was a regular Sunday, Ronca began. Auntie Kay had been to Lagos for the weekend. After church, she set off for home, an easy 2-hour drive. Auntie Kay is always careful. She never uses the expressway at night, doesn't venture out after dark. She keeps the doors locked and windows wound up, and all her valuables, even her wedding ring, were stashed in her handbag, hidden in a footwell. She'd even put her dummy bag on the passenger seat. "What's a dummy bag?" said Boo. "A cheap bag to foil the robbers, standard practice in Lagos. Auntie Kay has a set of keys, a broken phone and some old makeup in hers. It's a decoy. If you get carjacked, the thieves snatch it and run. By the time they find out, fingers crossed, you're miles away." "Bloody hell," said Boo. "Lord in your mercy protect us." Fifi touched her hand to her forehead, chest and shoulders. Ronke paused, worried Fifi would stab herself with a big needle. Once Fifi was safe from puncture wounds, she resumed. "Now, Auntie Kay isn't rich and her car isn't flashy. We're talking dusty 5-year-old Toyota Sienna. No leather seats, no aircon, no central locking. A standard Tocumbo." "Tocumbo?" Boo stumbled over the word. "A used car, you know, second-hand." Ronke had got so carried away with her story, she'd forgotten how little Boo knew about life in Nigeria. It means from across the sea, an import. By this time, Fifi had stopped working on Boo's hair, the comb and needle abandoned. She held one hand up to her face, a stricken but eager expression on it. Even Boo looked spellbound, if a little odd with a quarter of an afro attached to her head. Ronke turned her voice up a notch. "So Auntie Kay's on the expressway, singing along to the church programme, thinking about supper. She was pretty sure she had some Eddie Kaikor soup in the freezer. Then out of nowhere, a car zooms up beside her and forces her off the road onto the hard shoulder. This is Nigeria, Boo. The hard shoulder is not a safe haven. It's potholed and full of crap. Old burst tyres, burned out cars. You don't know what's lurking there, or who." "Oh, my sweet Jesus!" Fifi crossed herself again. "Bloody hell," whispered Boo. Auntie Kay is trembling like a leaf, cursing the idiot who ran her off the road. The church music is still blaring out on the radio. She's taking deep breaths. Crash! Ronke clapped her hands together. Fifi and Boo jumped gratifyingly. "The driver's side window explodes," Ronke continued. "A shower of tiny shards of glass rains down. Auntie Kay thinks it's a bomb. Rough hands yank her out of the car. Someone is shouting, but she has no idea what he's saying. She's thrown down on the hot, filthy tarmac. 3 men are leaning over her. They have machetes in their hands. Her wrapper is pulled open. She knows this is the end. She's going to be raped and murdered." "No way!" "Pray God save our auntie," breathed Fifi. "Bloody hell," said Boo. Then God speaks to Auntie Kay. He tells her to sing for her life. Ronke realised she'd gone a bit RuPaul on the last line, rappers in fools. So she closes her eyes, crosses her hands around her chest and bellows at the top of her voice. This God-speaking part hadn't actually happened. Ronke added it for Fifi's benefit. She considered lying on the floor doing a full arms-crossed impression. The salon was dirty. She sang, aiming for soprano, improvising as she didn't know the tune. Sorry about this. "Save me, Jesus, save me, Jesus, from this God-forsaken place." Ronke paused to ramp up the tension. "Then what?" said Boo. "Sweet holy Jesus," said Fifi. The next thing she hears is a sweet, soft voice asking if she's okay. Auntie Kay opens her eyes and there's a beautiful woman dressed in white, an angel, kneeling beside her and telling her she's safe. Turns out the thieves were scared of God and they scarpered. A passing car had seen it all and rushed to help. The driver of the car was an angel, a nurse in uniform. She picked Auntie Kay up, dusted her down and gave her an escort all the way home to Ibadan. "Oh, Yame, yeah, God is truly wonderful. He works in mysterious ways," said Fifi. "That said, I'm never going to Nigeria," said Boo. "Shit happens everywhere." Sorry about the singing.
That was such an interesting excerpt. Thank you so much for sharing.
I love Fifi.
And it was beautiful hearing you read it out loud. Oh my goodness. Okay, that excerpt is going to lead me to my next question, which is, what is that one thing, or maybe one or two things you would want people who haven't ever step their foot into Nigeria, what is that one thing you want them to know about your home country?
Well, the food, which is why there's so much food in my book. I mean, I'm slightly obsessed with food anyway, but when I'm here, I really miss Nigerian food. I mean, I think we've got an amazing cuisine, and it's a shame that like on every street you've got an Indian restaurant. I mean, it's not just Indian, you probably have South Indian, or, you know, it's almost specialised, and yet Nigerian food is not really on the map. But I go to this Nigerian restaurant with my friends, which is very similar to one in the book, and I can understand why people don't go there. I mean, the service is terrible, but it's supposed to be. So, but I think the food is one good thing. I also think there's just a complete disconnect with what modern Lagos. I've only lived in Lagos, so to me Nigeria is Lagos, which of course it isn't because it's a huge country. But you know, I do have, as Chimamanda famously said, she was interviewed in Paris by a respectable journalist who said, do you have bookshops in Nigeria? I say, yes, we got bookshops, we've got an Apple store. You know, it's kind of just, I think that knowing that we're just exactly the same, we're just normal people doing our lives, hustling to get on, you know, we're just, I think the one thing I'd like them to know, and the one thing I try to get across in my book, is that there's a lot more we have in common than we don't. Women are just women. It might be slightly more complicated if you're Nigerian or half Nigerian, but we're pretty much the same.
Yeah, I love the diversity of the narrative that stems from just one place. I mean, from Nigeria, you hear about poverty. Same Nigeria, you hear about the super wealthy people, and it's all sort of like a melting pot for people from different walks of life, and it's quite an interesting place to come from.
It is. And when I went on my book tour, I had friends saying, "But aren't you scared?" I'm like,
no,
I'm scared. You know, no, I'm not really scared. I mean, cities can be scary. Thailand, Bangkok can be scary. New York can be scary. And yes,
London.
Yeah. Don't stab me. So exactly. And I think, you know, we can, sometimes it can be very othering. And I wanted to do the opposite of othering in my book. I wanted to sort of, whatever the opposite of othering is.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. This is a very stupid question, but I'm just curious to know if you're more of a tea or coffee person, so if you read, or is it a bottle of red wine or champagne?
A glass of cava is the reward if I've actually achieved my aims. But I'm an iced coffee person. I can't drink hot drinks. I think it's growing up in a hot country. Although my dad drinks tea like a fish, but I cannot drink hot drinks. So my husband's there drinking cups of tea and I'm like, don't kiss me. And I'm iced coffee.
Oh, lovely. Have we got anyone with questions from the side or questions?
Have you started your next book?
Yes. Have you dreaded book 2, that difficult second arc? So yes, I have, and I'm currently editing. So I had a shitty first draft, there always are, and then I had a 2-book deal, so I'm obliged to write 2 books, which actually made it much harder because there's a ticking clock in the background and there's expectation. So your first book, there's 0 expectation, you're just writing. And then suddenly my agent phoned and said, make sure it's funny. And you think, my first book was funny, you know, so you have it. So it's much harder. So, and nobody sees it until you're happy. So I did a first draft, which was crap. And my husband helps with the plot, he's head of plot. I get all the glory, but he does half the work. So we ripped it apart, did a second draft and a third draft, and then the third draft I sent to my editors, and they came back with pages of this isn't working, this isn't working. They start off with, we love it, Nikki, this is wonderful. And then it's like, but pages of all the things are wrong. So you salt for a couple of days and kick things and shout, and then you think, okay, we can make this better. So I've done 1 set of structural edits with them, sent it back, thinking it's bloody perfect now, and they come back saying, but. So in the final stage, final structural edit is nearly there, and I love my book too. It's I'm a really lazy writer, so I centre my characters in places I've been. So Ronke's flat was my mother-in-law's flat, and Simi's flat was where my husband was living when we first started dating. And in this book I've cheated as well, so it crosses 2, so half of it is in Nigeria, half of it's here. And the book, it's inspired, this is going to sound really poncy, by Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. So fish out of water thing. So my character, Funke, is living in Luce, where I grew up, in the exact house. And then something terrible happens when she's about 10, and she has to come to England, to Somerset, where I live now. So I know what the scenery looks like to live with her English family. So it's like you have all the sort of prejudice, class, different views of moving country, but at its heart, it's a story of love and friendship and family, and whether that can make the difference between surviving and thriving. And because I like a bit of drama, there's obviously a bit of drama and a bit of inherited stories. But it's called Broken Stones, and I really like it, and it'll come out next year.
Oh,
Excellent.
thank you. Yeah, totally. My final question. Yeah, I always love to leave the personal questions to the last.
Okay.
Yeah. I know we've got a couple of migrants in the room, people who in their adult life decided to move to the UK, like myself. And one of the things that kind of like struggle, sort of like resonates with me about your stories, some of the culture shocks you experienced when you moved into the UK. And I know quite a number of us sometimes struggle with self-identity. There's also the struggle around fitting in. So what would you say to that young girl or young man who finds herself in the UK and is trying to,
I actually think I'm quite a positive person, and I actually think things are so much better, and I do think things are getting better. So when I first moved here, the reason I changed my name from Nikki to Nikki was because honestly Nikki was too complicated to pronounce. It was kind of, how do you spell that then? And these are people that can say Tchaikovsky and can write it, but you sort of fall for it. But now I think people are much more open. You're Toby, you haven't become Tony, or so I do think things are changing and things have got better.
Yeah.
But it depends where you're coming from. Like, you come from Nigeria, racism isn't a concept in Nigeria. It doesn't exist. We just don't have racism. So when you first see it, it's actually a shock.
Yeah.
And because Nigerians are one of the most arrogant, big-headed races you'll ever meet, it's not just a shock. It's like, really? You're better than me? Seriously? And that's a very different experience from a black person who's brought up here. So we have such different experiences, and I think, to me, diversity is a brilliant thing. I mean, Simi says in the book, I wish we could shag racism into oblivion, and I agree with her. I honestly think the more mixed up we are, the less we can. I think we'll find differences wherever they are, because it's no different from Hutus and Tutsis and I think the more we can mix things up. But my advice would be, I don't think conforming is a terrible thing. I don't like silos. I don't like the idea that in America black people live here and white. I'm not a big fan of that. I really think it's unhelpful. I think, just my opinion. I just think that there's, that people are nicer than you think, and I think there's an element of conforming. I mean, my mum is a white, blue-eyed, blonde person. She lived in Nigeria. You have to conform. She wore Ankara dresses, rocked them, and people loved her for it. She spoke a little bit of Nigerian. All you have to do is say a couple of words and people will. So I do think there's a bit of trying to conform and trying to get on, but retaining your own. Don't be a booth. Try and make sure you keep your identity.
Yeah.
But there aren't right or wrong answers, are there?
Yeah.
But eat your own food. When I was in Nigeria in June, by the end of the 2 weeks, I was like, God, I could kill for beans on toast. You always want what you can't have.
Yeah. Do you have any more questions from the audience, please? Anyone? Comments, suggestions, or
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I've heard several times that it's rude to say to someone, we all look different, I'm Scottish, I'm very pale. It's rude to say to someone, where did your family originate from? Do you find that offensive?
It's difficult because we had the where you're really, really from thing not that long ago, which I sometimes think people are really quick to take offence. I think you can choose to be offended, but I'm not saying this is the right view, I'm just saying it's my view, because I get into tact. There's this thing about Africans identifying with themselves. So I'm the first person, if I'm in a cab with a Nigerian guy, or where are you from, where are you really from? I say it all the time. So I find, how can you not be offended by me saying it? But so I just think I don't get offended, and I sometimes think we can be too quick. But on the other hand, some people are really rude. They're not from here. Where are you really from? It's like,
Yeah, the reason I want to ask is because I've lived in lots of different places, and I'm fascinated to hear people's stories. So I'm not looking at them and judging them, because we're all different.
Yeah.
And we were reading a book recently about racism, and I said I faced it in Surrey. And they looked at me and said, "Don't be ridiculous." And I said, "Yes, often people say, where are you from in Scotland?" And I say, "Near Glasgow." And they say, "Really? But
Didn't you
we
get beaten up?
understand you."
That's true.
So people make judgments.
Yeah, my husband's half Irish, and you know, the Irish are the tinkers, you know, we all, so I think the difference is if someone says, "Where are you from?" and I answer, "I'm from Dorset," I think you should leave it there rather than, "No, but really, where?" I think there's a question of just accepting. I don't think the question's rude, I think not accepting the answer is
does
possibly.
happen.
That's a good way.
In other countries as well, because one of the things of obviously Nikki being mixed races, we'll go to Morocco or we'll go to Egypt or something, and Nikki can be taken for being from there.
Which is really useful for getting cheap taxis. I open my mouth, I can be a local in lots and lots of countries. And again, they ask the question, and I don't take offence because I just like talking, so I just like,
Wow, amazing. This has been so engaging.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank you.
so much.
I really crap at selfies, I've got really short arms. Your hair's taking it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. We've got a raffle.
Oh yeah.
Raffle. Real quick. I will be having. Did you drop your paper?
Not yet.
No, not yet.
Anyone else? Sorry, I have to. Thank you.
Will you sign our book?
Of course.
Oh yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah.
I should have brought mine.
What else?
Wait, sorry, hold on.
Yeah, I'll trace it for you.
Amanda Perry.
Oh.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And then one more.
Okay.
Yeah. That lucky person.
Is that Ronke?
Oh, you're okay?
Oh, yeah, Ronke? Excellent.
Thank you so much for
Oh,
your time,
thank
Nikki.
you.
It's been
It's
wonderful
been
having
so
you.
lovely. Great
And
questions.
thank you so much for joining us as well. Nikki will be staying by for a few minutes to sign copies. If you want to grab a picture with her, that would be awesome as well. And you want to tag the library and the book lady as well. And we, she is one of the best persons ever to follow on social media. Nikki would always make sure to retweet. She will repost on her Instagram story, and she's such an amazing person. So yeah, make sure to tag Nikki as well. We hope to see you next month for Ayobami Adebayo's
She's a top
thing. Yeah. Actually an amazing one. I haven't started the book yet, but we'll get into it real soon, and I'm looking forward to an exciting time with everyone as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
And the winners punch you, I guess.
Yeah. Which cover?
Oh, do we get? Oh, we get copies of the book.
Yes.
Of course, I watch the news.
The American.
Yes, American. Oh, I thought you were going to take a picture with her.
And if you want to buy copies as well.
Well, you don't want to take it. Oh, I do. I mean, I'm staying a bit so I can let more people go.
Thank you so much.
Stop.
Oh, sorry.
Don't worry.